This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Dr. Mariah White, host of Your Life Matters, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Your Life Matters, where we talk about dreaming big and dreaming bold to reach your wildest dreams in both your health and your happiness. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Your Life Matters. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello, my friend. Thank you for tuning in to Rewritten. I appreciate it. I am your host, Julianne Condia. I love Rewritten. I love being able to share my story. I love being able to share things I've learned in hopes of empowering you and helping you dream beyond what you think. I want you to set the bar so high, and I want you to take all the action, and I want you just to go for it. Today's episode is all going to be about anxiety. I think that at some point or another, we've all worried to some capacity in our lives. And I hope by sharing my story that it empowers you to make health a priority. And it also encourages you to know that on your path to self-discovery and self-care, that you're always going to have things that come up that either worry you, burden you, stress you out. And I do believe that you can work through that. I really, really do. So, anxious for nothing. That was a sermon that I heard, and it really spoke to me because at the time I felt like I had peaked at anxiety in motherhood of just having my baby. Where, worrying about her future, worrying about if she was breathing, her physical needs, and a lot of it was just going on in my head. I was creating these scenarios that weren't real. And the thing is before I had Faye, my daughter, I was telling Eric, almost prepping, because I've heard so many women go through postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and I had talked to Eric telling him, I want to be able to share with you what's happening in my head once I have Faye and now. And I really believe starting that conversation allowed a safe space for me to speak out what was going on internally, and then therefore it lost all its power. And thankfully, Eric is such a safe person to go to that he never thought those thoughts were crazy. He never made me feel bad for them. He was just so encouraging to the fact that I would just speak what was going on in my head. And after I would speak them out, it almost seemed silly to me that I would even think and come to those conclusions that were so far-fetched and so not even real, not a part of my reality. So Anxious for Nothing is the title of this episode. And friend, I just want to come meeting you where you're at. We are all so different. We all walk different seasons. We have different stories, and we have just different journeys. And this is mine. So I do believe that there are more extreme cases than others. I am just sharing my personal experience and what I've done to create solutions. And I am a very solution-oriented person in general. I'm very forward-thinking, and I always want to work through it and not just sit in it. And there's advantages to that, but there's also disadvantages that I can easily disconnect myself emotionally, and I can move on without fully thinking and feeling. So those are things that I'm working on. Most of what we worry about actually never comes true. All the things, I want you to think about some of the things that you've worried about, and did they come true? I think back to being in high school and worrying about my grades. which is so silly to me now because I don't even use my college degree. I'm building a business based off of me caring about people and me taking care of myself and me believing in people. That is how I'm building my business. And I do not use my credentials. I do not use my college degree. I do not use the grades or anything. But I remember feeling so worried about getting into a college and getting a college degree and making and having money. I remember when I was a kid, I would worry about bills even though I was a kid. That was something that was always heavy on my heart. And I think a lot of us, it doesn't have to be money related, but at some point or another, we worried about something in school, something with our families. I remember a thought, I was worried about, would I ever find the right person? Would I get a divorce someday? Because I come from a divorced family. Those were things that I worried about. And I was very comforted in this quote. The goodness of God always carries us through. He is our breath, He is our strength, and He is our source. I do think that God will give you more than you can handle because otherwise we wouldn't rely on Him. A lot of times people want to comfort people who are in stress and worry and heartbreak and mourning because they feel awkward and they don't know how to respond. So they want to say, God is good. God's timing is always right. You're telling me that, this pain is caused by God, essentially, right? And I just think that God is so much bigger than that. I do think He allows things to happen because He knows the capacity of love that we need. I do think that He allows things to happen so we can grow and lean on each other more. I do believe that when we go through things, that brings new people into our lives because of the things we've gone through. I've been able to connect with way more women off of loss than ever before, all from just sharing my miscarriage. And there was power in that because you felt less alone. The goodness of God always carries us through. He is our breath, He is our strength, and He is our source. I remember when I decided to quit my job mid-year of teaching. It sounds so badass, and how I was really feeling when I made that decision was terrified. But I knew I had to do it. But I remember thinking about money. And I remember thinking about what if I fail? And that caused some worry. And then I did it. And once I quit my job, I realized the worst that could happen is that I don't make money. I could always go back to teaching. The worst that could happen is that I look like a failure to other people. That's not the worst thing that could happen in my life. It could be an embarrassing moment of my life, but I could survive that. And so I just kept going. And I just think too, if I would have just played into the scarcity and played into the worry, I wouldn't have known otherwise. If I didn't leap, if I didn't go for it, if I didn't trust the process, if I just didn't trust myself enough, I would have never known if I would have been able to do it or not. And I think all the time too, if it wouldn't have worked out the way that it did, I would have still learned something. I would have gotten more grit in my life. And I do think in life, you either need a dream or you need grit. A dream of something bigger, or grit from you just can live through tough things. You can survive tough things. You can work because of tough things. That was a huge learning curve for me. And then I remember wanting to move across the country. I remember worrying about community. I remember thinking about Eric and I have always worked in the same school, and this would be the first year that him and I weren't working together. I remember worrying about that. I remember thinking about I need to pray for my marriage because I'm worried that if we don't set boundaries, something could happen to our marriage while moving across the country. I remember when we moved here, I was all by myself. Eric was working a lot, and I felt like I didn't have anybody. And I remember feeling so worried because we lived in Silicon Valley. which is the most expensive area in the United States of America. I remember feeling the weight of that and the stress of that and the guilt of that. But I survived it because I kept on pressing, I kept on trusting myself, and I had two choices. I could sit there and worry, or I could sit there and get to work. And I chose work. And what I ended up proving to myself is that I can be in tough situations and still prosper. I remember when Eric decided to leave his job. And so here we were, two entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. We're nuts. We're crazy. And I remember feeling so worried. And I remember looking at Eric, and I remember all the conversations and tears because we were so uncertain. Uncertainty can create a lot of worry. And I said to him, what is your biggest fear anyway with this? His was so obnoxious. It's so crazy what our brains can do. His was go to prison. And then he asked me what mine was, just as obnoxious, and it was to go bankrupt. And we looked at each other and we laughed and we were like, that's not going to happen. And if the bankruptcy thing were to ever happen, we would still survive that. We would still survive prison too, I think. I don't know. It's so crazy. All of the things that you think about, the most of what we worry about never comes true. And it's so crazy how much of a weight that can carry in our lives. So as we've taken action and written it down and gotten it off our chest, I swear, Eric and I always say, speak it out because it will lose all of its power over you. Because when you keep those thoughts trapped in your mind, you are battling something that may seem so much bigger than you. But when you can just write it down, talk it out, and process it through, you realize, I have nothing to lose here, or this is not the worst thing that could happen, or I know that I can get through this. I know that I will learn something from this. I think everything is a teachable moment in life. Everything. When we're not patient, those moments teach us how to be patient. Makes us reflect on more patience in our life. So, pregnancy. I had a miscarriage 2 years ago, and I remember starting TTC, which is trying to conceive, and I remember feeling really nervous about it. What if we have another miscarriage? Then I thought, I know I could survive another one. And so we ended up going to TTC, and we got pregnant, and which is so grateful. But what I didn't realize is that I would have a lot of triggers in my pregnancy with Faye. In the first trimester, I had some spotting, which really led me down a rabbit hole of I'm having another miscarriage. I remember being on the couch one whole day, just sobbing, thinking about I'm having a miscarriage. Then I remember thinking about, okay, this does not mean that that's true. And you are not doing anything other than perpetuate more worry into your life. So I talked to Eric about it, and I talked to some good friends about it. And then I realized that that was a common thing in pregnancy. And then I had Faye. And those first 2 weeks of having a baby are very emotional. They're very up and down. You are so sleep deprived. Everything is a fog. Everything is a daze. You don't even remember half of it. It's wild. And I remember thinking in my head, is she breathing? Oh my gosh, she's going to get bullied one day. What happens if a man takes advantage of her? My mind just spiraled. So I started to talk about it. And I started to just share because vulnerability is more difficult for me than the average person. Transparency, super easy. But the vulnerability of my fears and worries are hard to communicate to the people around me. But I said, and I would keep my promise to myself, that I would talk. And I would talk about it because I did not want to be held captive in my worry. So the more that I've talked about it, the better it's felt, and the more I felt comforted and also connected because so many other women experience the same thing postpartum. So as my journey has progressed, the more I've talked about it, the more I pray about it, and the more I reflect on the goodness of God always carries us through. He is our breath, our strength, and our source. I go to God, I go to Eric, and I go to some good friends. And friend, I want you to know that your worry doesn't have to hold you captive. My suggestion and my encouragement to you is speak it out. Because when you write down things such as, my biggest fear is to go bankrupt, and you look at that, you realize there's worse things that could happen. Sometimes it's suffocating to know how you're going to make ends meet, or how you're going to meet a deadline, or how you're going to meet your spouse. But I really do believe that everything aligns in order to guide us and to make us stronger and not hinder us and make us feel suffocated. Life is such an adventure. Life is such a beautiful treat, and there are so many blessings. And I really do try to focus on the goodness, the blessings, what has come of the hard things I've gone through in my life. I've survived hard things before. I can survive this. That is the type of mindset I choose when I feel worried. Worried still comes up, but I speak it out, and then I start thinking about what I'm grateful for and how I've made it through hard things. I hope this spoke to you. Please let me know. Screenshot this, send it to me. Let me know how this spoke to you. Friend, thank you for being a listener of Rewritten. Please share this with 3 friends. It would mean just the world to me. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next week.